Title card, Up Next Ames Area, Metropolitan Planning Organisation, Mayor, City Council and AMPO Transportation Policy Committee sitting at a curved dais. Public Works staff seated across at the staff table.
Well, good evening. I call the March 24th Ames Area Metropolitan Planning Organization Transportation Policy Committee order. And we have a couple items on the agenda tonight. First, we have consent. Is there a motion approving the minutes of the regular meeting from January 27th or any corrections that need to be brought to our attention?
Move approval.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, move second. Those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay, that was an aye, I presume. Any opposed? Motion carried. All right, move on to item number 2. Draft FY 2027 Transportation Planning Work Program and setting May 26th, 2026 as a public hearing. Justin and Kyle, good evening.
Good evening. So we have a short kind of slide deck here just to go over the contents of this year's work program. So as a reminder of what a work program is, it's an annual requirement for all MPOs to develop one of these for the upcoming fiscal year. And its role is to identify the planning activities that the MPO is going to undertake during that fiscal year, including a program budget for conducting those activities. And the main way the activities are funded are through federal planning dollars from Federal Highway Administration and Federal Transit Administration. And those sources are targeted to MPOs through a formula process in order to conduct those activities that are identified in the work program. And then those sources do require a 20% local match. And there is a minor exception to that I can touch on here on the next slide. So here's all the sources for the fiscal year 2027 that are coming from Federal Highway and Federal Transit. You can see the first 4 rows are carryover from fiscal year 2025. So how carryover works is it's from 2 years prior because fiscal year 2026 isn't over yet. So they don't like to carry that over until the fiscal year is over. But then the new amounts are under those. So there's Federal Highway Planning Funds and then 5305D from Federal Transit are kind of the 2 main sources that we get. And then we also are borrowing some STBG funds, which we'll cover STBG in a moment on the next item, but that's our MPO's formula funds that are typically used for construction type projects. But sometimes when we need to, we borrow some of that for planning activities. And then the last one is Complete Streets. And Complete Streets is the one that doesn't require a local match. It's a pretty small amount of funding, but Complete Streets is for multimodal type activities usually is how we use it. And then I'll touch on how we plan on using those in this fiscal year here in a moment. And so rather than run through every little thing in the program, because a lot of it's the same year to year, I'll just touch on kind of the major things that are happening for fiscal year 2027. So the first one is the creation of a regional safe routes to school plan. And then there is 3 corridor studies going on. There's the Duff Avenue corridor study from the railroad crossing near Main Street to 16th Street. That's, again, that's ongoing. And we expect that to wrap up probably this fall. And then there is 2 more corridor studies. There's Lincoln Way corridor study from Duff Avenue to Grand and the South Dayton corridor from South Dayton Place to the interchange with US 30. And we have some maps coming up here to kind of show where these are to kind of give a better overview. And then the last bullet point was just developing the transportation improvement program and administering our MPO's grant funding programs. So here's 2 maps. The left one is the Duff Avenue corridor study. And again, that one's already underway. We're about to kind of move into we finished all the traffic analysis, collecting the data, forecasting volumes and reviewing crash and multimodal type data. And we're kind of about to move into that public outreach and stakeholder outreach phase coming up pretty shortly here. So you'll probably see some things on that on social media and hear from that. I think the plan is to bring the item as a workshop to City Council in July, I believe. And so that's kind of the schedule for the Duff Avenue corridor study. Again, it's from the railroad to 16th Street. The stars are kind of like the major intersections being modeled. Those are mostly where the signals are today. We're also taking a close look at the pedestrian crossing at East 12th Street, kind of by the medical campus with Mary Greeley and McFarland, because there's a lot of clinic and hospital staff that cross there and others who cross there to access the medical facilities. So we wanted to take a close look at that. And we're also looking at the railroad crossing as far as just the impacts that train crossings have as far as queuing and delay is what we're focusing on this study. And then for South Dayton on the right there, it runs from the interchange with US 30 up to South Dayton Place on the north side there. The main driver for this study is there's already some existing operational concerns being observed there as far as a lot of queuing on the ramps. Isaac Newton Drive and its intersection with South Dayton can be pretty congested and difficult for traffic coming off the side street. And there's a lot of development that's been coming in and is about to go in this area. So the study is really trying to look at not just existing operations, but also all the development that we're anticipating over the next 10 to 20 years. And then we also have, of course, the new R3C, the recycling campus to the north a bit of this map. And you can see that dashed line is an anticipated future connection that we would expect probably to be called Southeast 9th Street, but it'll kind of tie into Friel Drive to the north. Yeah, kind of where that laser pointer is right now. And so that connection will also be looked at with this study as well, and any sort of impacts that might have, as well as kind of looking at any potential traffic like truck traffic coming in and out of the new campus, recycling campus.
Circling corridor study area.
And yeah, I think that's mostly what I had for Dayton. And then for Lincoln Way, this corridor study really you can see the link development areas like right in the middle of this corridor, and that'll definitely be a big focal point. There's been a lot of studies already that have been done in connection with the development, but we're kind of trying to tie in the latest plan that the link has, in addition to all of our, from the city standpoint, operational concerns. And just trying to tie everything together into one study and see really what's the best vision for the corridor, looking ahead all the way, 20, 30 years into the future. And it'll really focus on, I'd say, Clark and Kellogg Avenue as far as, a lot of turning issues there, as far as left turns off of Lincoln Way. And then looking at Lincoln Way and Grand, seeing how that's operating. Also looking at multimodal connectivity through this area as well, as far as like what's the best solution, shared use path, other types of treatments. So that's kind of, let me pause there, I guess. So is there any questions on the corridor studies or any of the other items that were brought up so far?
I just have one.
Yep.
So the timing of these studies is important.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes we've had studies, and I've been concerned if they've been done during the summer when the students aren't here, and I'm concerned that it's really capturing accurate data. Can you talk to us about the timing of these studies?
Yeah. So with the ongoing Duff Avenue study, we have, as far as data goes, we have continuous turning movement counts from our signals, because we have upgraded detection as a part of that traffic fiber network that I think you've probably heard about in the past. But that's been built out through this corridor. So we have continuous turning movement counts for most of these intersections. 16th Street, we had to go out and collect some counts, but we made sure to do so while students were here during the school year. And as far as outreach goes, like I said, we're about to start that effort here very shortly within the next week or so. And like you were getting at, we want to make sure we cover students and make sure it's reflective of the whole communities before they're all gone for the summer. For Dayton and for Lincoln Way, the studies are expected to start in July with some data collection, but the data for Dayton's actually already been collected this past month, I believe. And for Lincoln Way, we also have those continuous counts like we do for Duff. So we can kind of pull data from any time of year in the past year or so. And then for outreach, again, we'll make sure to line that up with when we think we can get the most feedback, reach the most people.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Other questions?
Kyle, I think you may have already addressed my concern, but I just want to confirm this. When I saw the map for the South Dayton study,
Yep.
I realized Highway 30 is going to be rerouting traffic onto Dayton and that interchange. And so you're saying we've already got the data we need, and that's not going to skew anything.
Yep, and for the reason you mentioned, we wanted to collect those counts now before that started. So yes, we tried to get ahead of that. Yep.
Thanks.
Appreciate the fact that you're considering, a potential intersection of future free-wheel drive extension through that property, but that could be something that may be way off in the future.
Right.
What considerations being given to where Southeast Fifth ties in with South Dayton? Because it could be that we may be experiencing, once the R3C campus opens up, increased traffic, and I'm not sure how much it's going to be. I know Justin could certainly speak to that, better, but I'm just wondering, is that something that would be beneficial to extend that just a little further and pick that up and think about that and do some, modeling?
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head there. Our vision is for our transfer trucks that leave to actually go up to Lincoln Way, east along East Lincoln Way, and come south along Dayton to avoid this intersection at Southeast Fifth. And one of the primary reasons is we're looking for right-hand turns with a lot of those trucks. Right-hand turns are easier to make. They're easier for them for visibility and to work through. So with that being said, though, there are likely some packer and hauler trucks that will be coming in through that area. So Kyle and I have talked about it this afternoon about looking at what we can do to make sure we've got enough data on that Southeast Fifth intersection too, as we're looking at this, to say, are there improvements that maybe aren't needed today, but that could be in the short term as the R3C comes online that we might need to look for further up the line. So we're taking that into consideration. We're definitely going to look into that, how it impacts that operation.
Yeah, and just thinking about, I know that with the curbside recycling is going to reduce the amount of people coming out, but you still got yard waste that we're going to be trying to encourage, and there'll still be, private vehicles going out there, and just making sure that, since we're doing the study in this whole corridor, it seemed to be appropriate just to kind of make sure we pick that up and factor that in. And it may have no effect, but just thinking about it, because I would expect to see increased traffic out there.
Yes, correct. Mm-hmm.
So it will be considered, or you're going to have you said you're already.
We discussed it this afternoon. We got to check with our consultant on where we're at already on the data collection. See, can we add it in there and make sure it matches up with what we have. Obviously, we picked up data further to the south. I think there's still time to get that before some of this Highway 30 traffic really gets in there, so we don't skew that data too far. But I think we can make it happen. We just haven't had that conversation yet with a consultant, but we will definitely look into what we can do to do that.
Great, thank you.
Do you guys have some target dates of when these reports will be completed?
Yeah, so like I said, for Duff, we're kind of anticipating the fall range. So workshop probably in July, and then wrap up in August or September. For South Dayton and Lincoln Way, we're hoping to start them in July and wrap them up around summer next year. So summer 2027.
All right.
And so just kind of showing the budget for the program budget. So the way that we organize the activities in the work program is we kind of break it into these different work elements, they're called, or categories. Administration is more or less MPO staff time towards preparing for these types of meetings, technical committee meetings, just making sure the MPO is running day to day appropriately, following all of our federal laws and requirements. Regional planning is pretty all-encompassing. It pretty much is any planning activities like data modeling, analysis, developing all the MPO plans. And then there's also sub-activities. So a lot of those are what I've kind of hit on, like the Safe Routes to School plan consultant is like a separate line item just to make sure we're clearly delineating how much is budgeted for each of these major projects that are requiring like a consultant on board to help us out. So you can see like Safe Routes to School is budgeted for $60,000. Lincoln Way is $125,000 for just a couple examples. The local match for those is currently budgeted in the City of Ames CIP, the draft CIP that's kind of going through its approval process because the MPO is funded through the City of Ames right now as far as local match goes. And those projects are also listed in the City of Ames CIP as well, individually. And then transit planning is, we work with SciRide a lot on, their programming that they require for their federal aid. And then data and analytics is kind of mostly what doesn't fall in regional planning. It's kind of like the data intensive side basically of the regional planning. And then we also have a consultant that helps us with our regional demand model, making sure that's up to date in between those long range plan updates. And then we also have some data that we procure through the MPO. There's a traffic data software that we have called Streetlight Data that kind of gives us some region-wide data analytical capabilities. And we also have a RMT pavement data that's on a lot of the City of Ames fleet vehicles that's collecting payment data. That's also funded through the MPO right now as well. And then the Complete Streets activity, we plan on using that this year for the Safe Routes to School plan. It seems like the most appropriate use of Complete Streets funding. And so any MPO time up to that maximum amount shown there is what would be in Complete Streets. So that's pretty much what I have.
Can you go back that slide?
Yeah.
I just caught here that your math doesn't seem to work. You have all zeros and you got 468, but you have 383 in the last one. Is there some carryover? How's that? See what I'm saying?
Oh yeah, I see what you're saying. I think that's because I got an updated Complete Streets number at the last minute.
Okay.
I probably forgot to change the.
Okay. If you want to just,
I'll make sure
it's a
yes.
Scribner error from a standpoint.
Yes.
If everything else is all correct, we're talking about less than $100.
Yeah, no, you're correct. I will check on that.
Since that has to get filed right with the federal government, make sure all of our numbers are correct.
Yep, we'll make sure it's right.
It's a disease I have.
It's good to catch those now.
Okay, go ahead.
And then these are just the next steps. So we plan on opening up a public comment period after draft approval tonight for about a month, so mostly through April. And at that same time, Iowa DOT and our federal partners will review the document as well. And then final approval and the public hearing would be May 26th.
Very good. Any other questions? All right, entertain a motion approving the draft FY27 Transportation Planning Work Program and setting May 26, 2026 as date of public hearing.
So moved.
Is there a second? John, thank you. Those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Item 3, Surface Transportation Block Grant.
Yep. So our MPO administers 3 different formula grant programs. There's the Surface Transportation Block Grant, which is STBG, which is usually used for like roadway construction projects. It's pretty a flexible program as far as what it can be used on. Most transportation projects could be eligible for STBG. Transportation Alternatives Program, or TAP, is usually used for multimodal type projects. So like shared use paths is a common use that we have for that. And then the Carbon Reduction Program is kind of it's a newer program. It's used for projects that their main benefit would be reducing emissions. And right now, I think the main project program using that funding is the final phase of the traffic fiber network and the traffic adaptive benefits that come along with that. But each year, the MPO releases a notice of funding to solicit project applications from our member agencies for those programs. This year, the NOFO was released in December 2025, and the deadline for applications was February 20th this year. And that would cover any projects for federal fiscal years 2027 through 2030. This year, we did not solicit projects for the carbon reduction program just because that's a program that's a little bit up in the air as far as the fate it might have with the next infrastructure bill. So we're kind of waiting to see what Congress does at the federal level as far as continuing that program or changing that program with the next bill. So this year, also I should add the basic requirements too for funding. They have to be in the short-term fiscally constrained plan from the MTP, the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, which for us is Ames Connect 2050, which was adopted last fall. The only exception for that is roadway maintenance and reconstruction projects do not need to be directly identified, but they must demonstrate alignment with the goals and priorities of the plan. And the project also has to be located within our MPO and sponsored by at least one member agency. This year, we received 4 applications for STBG funding, and we did not receive any TAP funding applications. So per that notice of funding opportunity, this criteria was on the screen here is what was used to score the application. So 60% was the impact on the transportation network, 25% was alignment with Ames Connect 2050, as well as other adopted plans in the region. 10% was project readiness and understanding of federal aid process, and 5% was the public involvement steps that project would undertake. So here's the table with all the projects, applications that we received. We got 3 from the city of Ames and 1 from Cyride. And so the table shows the project description, the fiscal year that the project is requesting funding for, how much was requested, and then also the score that was assigned by staff and recommended by the technical committee. And so at the end of the day, the recommendation was to award the full amount for all 4 projects because they all demonstrated alignment with the MTP. They all showed benefit to the network, and we also project to have enough funding through the MPO's formula funds to cover these requested amounts. So I just have some maps for these projects. This is just a Cyride route map. Obviously, their project was basically purchasing a new bus, and so there doesn't make sense to have a map of a bus, but this is all the places their buses go. For East 13th Street, so it's the eastbound lanes between the I-35 ramps, reconstructing those, as well as reconstructing the intersection of Lincoln Way and Dayton Avenue. So those projects would be bid and let together as one. That's why they're kind of both in one project, even though they're at 2 different locations. And then there's East 13th Street from McCormick to Dayton Avenue, also a reconstruction shown there. And then there's a mill and overlay project for Duff Avenue from 6th Street to 13th Street. So that's not a full reconstruction. It's a mill and overlay. So that was all the projects. So I guess I'll open it up to any questions the committee has on any particular project.
Thanks, Kyle. Questions?
Remind us what the schedule is. We're improving the bike infrastructure I apologize, that's Grand. Are we doing anything with bike infrastructure on Duff at the same time?
I don't believe that.
There's a lot going on in that corridor. With the corridor study happening just right now and this project, we're kind of balancing 2 things here. I think what you'll see, the Ames City Council will see brought to them some potential forward thinking for what we can do to increase multimodal infrastructure along Duff Avenue. It's going to be a challenge to get it in with the funding we have with this project that's shown here on the map. However, what we plan to do through the planning effort that we've got going on right now between 16th and the railroad tracks is to set the corridor up for the future as we look to reconstruct this in the probably 15-year range. How can we build up that infrastructure even more for multimodal facilities in the area? So right now, the project you're looking at right now is just a mill and overlay, keeping the road the same, and keeping the same configuration as far as geometry that's on there.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions?
You mentioned that street repair can fall into this funding category, and that makes sense. But did it push anything else out of consideration? Like, are there any things that would have been short-term projects that would have made this list if not for?
Well, the way the process is set up is that it's the member agencies that decide what they want to apply for.
I see.
And so the city of Ames and Cyride submitted for the projects they thought they would like to see the federal funding for. And so, like I said earlier, if it's a short-term project, like a non-maintenance type project, so maybe like a capacity expansion or a multi-use trail, something like that, they can apply. It's just they must not be ready or haven't programmed it yet on the local side of things. But I'd say no, I don't think any project has been pushed back because of these projects.
Thanks.
Other questions? All right, entertain a motion on FY 2027 through 2030 Surface Transportation Block Grant funds to various regional transportation projects. There's 4 projects listed. And if the committee is okay, I would entertain a motion on items 3A through 3D. Is there a motion?
I would move approval of the resolutions.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. Those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Any opposed or abstaining? Motion carried. Thank you, gentlemen. Policy Committee, any comments? John?
Oh, that's right.
Supervisor? Council? All right, entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move we adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, those in favor say aye.
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 All right,
Aye.
we are adjourned. We will reconvene City Council meeting in about 5 minutes.
Title card, Up Next Ames City Council.